The atmosphere was electric as Kelly Clarkson welcomed country music legend Tim McGraw to her talk show, a segment fans had eagerly anticipated for weeks. From the outset, there was an undeniable tension in the air, barely masked by polite smiles and surface-level banter. Kelly, known for her candid questions and unfiltered charm, dove headfirst into a discussion about the evolving state of country music, a topic McGraw is notoriously passionate about. When she referenced a recent interview where he seemed to criticize younger artists for watering down the genre, Tim's demeanor shifted noticeably. He leaned forward, his smile tight, and shot back with a pointed comment about media twisting words to stay relevant. Kelly laughed, clearly trying to defuse the moment, but the damage was done. The tension spiked as they sparred over artistic integrity, with Kelly defending the new wave of artists and Tim growing visibly agitated. The audience, initially buzzing with excitement, fell into a stunned silence as the lighthearted tone unraveled into a fiery exchange neither had planned. As the clash escalated, Kelly attempted to pivot the conversation by mentioning Tim's recent collaboration with a pop producer, hoping to steer the dialogue toward common ground, but her tone, perhaps unintentionally, came off as sarcastic. "Interesting choice, for someone so protective of the genre," she quipped, raising an eyebrow. Tim's jaw clenched, and he removed his mic pack with a deliberate calm that only heightened the room's discomfort. "You know, Kelly, I didn't come here to be lectured by someone who left country music behind," he snapped, his voice low but cutting. A few gasps echoed through the audience, some of whom nervously glanced around, unsure whether they were watching real conflict or an elaborate publicity stunt. Kelly sat back in her chair, momentarily stunned, before replying, "And I didn't expect a legend to be so thin-skinned about the next generation." That was the final straw. Tim stood up, muttering something under his breath, and walked off the set without another word. The cameras kept rolling as the show's producers scrambled behind the scenes and Kelly, ever the professional, turned back to the audience with a forced smile. "Well, that was unexpected," she said, as the audience broke into awkward applause, unsure how else to respond to the dramatic walk-off they had just witnessed. Backstage was a whirlwind of chaos as Tim McGraw paced furiously near the exit, ignoring assistants pleading for him to stay and cool down. His publicist tried to calm him, reminding him of the optics and the headlines already forming in real time. "Let them write what they want," Tim barked, his southern drawl edged with frustration. "I'm not going to sit there and be ambushed." Meanwhile, inside the studio, Kelly had gone to an unscheduled commercial break. She slipped behind the curtain, her face flushed, not with embarrassment, but with anger. Was this personal? She demanded of her producer. Because he came in hot. The staff, caught between two titans of the industry, didn't know where to look or what to say. Phones were already buzzing with texts from media outlets and fans watching live, clips circulating within minutes of Tim's abrupt exit. Social media exploded with theories. Some blamed Kelly for pushing too far, others accused Tim of being a diva unable to handle criticism. But what the public didn't know was that there had been tension between the two artists for years. A long-buried disagreement over a failed tour partnership and creative differences had never been fully resolved. And while both had kept it civil in the press, the resentment had simmered just beneath the surface, waiting for the perfect spark to ignite, and it had. Just exploded, live on national television. In the hours that followed, the fallout intensified. Headlines flooded every entertainment outlet. Tim McGraw walks off Kelly Clarkson show in live meltdown, country clash, McGraw vs. Clarkson shakes industry, each more sensational than the last. Kelly's team worked overtime crafting a public statement that struck a balance between grace and assertiveness, while Tim's camp remained conspicuously silent. Behind closed doors, however, Kelly was far from composed. He knew what he was walking into, she vented to a close friend over the phone. He just didn't like being held accountable. At the same time, Tim retreated to his Nashville home, where he paced his private studio, venting to Faith Hill, his wife and longtime collaborator. "She baited me," he insisted. That whole segment was a setup. Faith, ever the voice of reason, encouraged him to respond with diplomacy, but even she couldn't deny that old wounds had been reopened. Industry insiders began leaking stories to the press. How Tim had once turned down a mentorship offer Kelly extended to an up-and-coming country artist. How Kelly had quietly criticized his stance on genre purity during a past interview. Podcasts, TikTok creators, and gossip panels dissected every facial expression, every word exchanged, creating a media storm neither of them could fully control. And as the hours turned into days, both artists were faced with a choice: double down and escalate the feud further, or confront the past they had both buried for far too long. 3 days later, with the internet still ablaze and speculation at its peak, Kelly Clarkson made a bold move. She opened her next show with no band, no fanfare, just her seated on stage in a single spotlight. "I owe it to you, my audience, to be honest," she began, her tone steady but serious. She spoke candidly about the interview, acknowledging the sharp exchange and taking responsibility for her part in escalating it. "Tim and we've had a complicated history," she admitted, pausing as the audience hung on every word. "There's mutual respect, but also real tension we never truly dealt with." Moments later, in a stunning twist that no one saw coming, Tim McGraw entered from stage right. The crowd gasped as he walked calmly to center stage, nodded at Kelly, and took the seat beside her. "I walked off angry," he said plainly, "but I've had time to think." What followed was a rare and raw conversation, two artists stripping away years of ego, pride, and miscommunication in front of millions. They spoke of past disappointments, creative clashes, and their different visions for the future of country music. There were moments of laughter, even a tear or two. By the end, the two stood together, exchanging a heartfelt hug as the audience rose in a thunderous standing ovation. What started as a public breakdown had become a powerful moment of reconciliation, reminding everyone that even the biggest stars are still human, and that sometimes, the only way forward is through the fire. But not everyone was satisfied with the public reconciliation. In the weeks that followed the now iconic moment, whispers began to swirl within the industry. Was the walk-off real, or a carefully orchestrated publicity stunt to revive fading interest in both stars? Critics pointed to the perfect pacing of the drama, the conveniently timed follow-up appearance, and the sharp rise in streaming numbers for both Kelly's and Tim's latest releases. "It was too clean," one anonymous label exec told a music blog. "Almost scripted." Fans divided into camps, some fiercely defending their favorite, others accusing both artists of manipulating emotions for ratings. Meanwhile, Kelly and Tim maintained a united front, even agreeing to co-headline a one-night charity concert in Nashville, dubbed The Reckoning, Real Talk, Real Music. The event sold out in 11 minutes. But behind the scenes, unease lingered. Tim's longtime manager abruptly resigned, citing creative differences, and Kelly quietly turned down a network offer for a new season of her talk show. Rumors of a documentary deal floated through back channels. As their reputations rebounded publicly, questions about authenticity haunted their every move. And while the cameras had captured a picture-perfect resolution, those closest to them knew the wounds hadn't fully healed. The storm might have passed, but the aftershocks were far from over. The tension reached a boiling point once more when, just 2 months after the Reckoning concert, a leaked voicemail surfaced, an audio clip allegedly featuring Tim's voice, recorded just days before his initial appearance on Kelly's show. In the message, he could be heard venting to an unknown confidant, saying, "If she brings up that tour again, I swear I'll walk off set." The leak hit the internet like wildfire, reigniting conspiracy theories and pouring gasoline on a fire that had barely been smoldering. Tim's team scrambled to deny its authenticity, claiming the voice had been deep-faked, AI generated by opportunists hoping to cash in on the buzz. But audio experts chimed in, analyzing waveforms and tone inflections, and many concluded it was almost certainly real. Kelly remained silent publicly, but internally, she was livid. "So he did come in ready to explode," she reportedly told a close producer, feeling betrayed by what now seemed like a staged provocation. The music industry, meanwhile, became a minefield for both stars. Award show invites were quietly pulled, endorsement deals paused, and joint collaborations shelved. The healing moment that had so inspired the public now seemed hollow, contrived, and worse, marketed. And as both artists retreated from the spotlight, a once private feud had become a global symbol of media manipulation, ego warfare, and the thin, fragile line between authenticity and performance in the age of viral fame. As the storm deepened, both Kelly and Tim found themselves increasingly isolated, not just from fans and the media, but from their inner circles. Kelly's longtime musical director resigned, citing irreconcilable creative pressures, and Tim's label delayed his next album indefinitely. Invitations to major country music events dried up. A-list peers who once hailed them as trailblazers now kept their distance, not wanting to be caught in the gravitational pull of a scandal spiraling out of control. But while the public narrative was one of collapse, behind closed doors, a different story was unfolding. Tim, rattled by the leak and the fallout, began quietly working with a crisis therapist, not for damage control, but to confront the deeper wounds that had festered for years. Regrets over failed partnerships, the pressure to stay relevant in a youth-obsessed industry, and a long-buried resentment toward artists like Kelly who had dared to evolve outside country's rigid expectations. Kelly, too, withdrew into self-reflection. She stopped taking meetings, skipped press junkets, and started journaling late into the night, pouring her rawest thoughts into new lyrics that no one had yet heard. And then, without warning, a cryptic post appeared on both their social media pages. A black screen with white text, "No more cameras. No more edits. Just truth." The post was signed by both of them. Fans were stunned. Was it a resignation from fame, or the beginning of something unexpected, something real, and finally, unfiltered? The cryptic joint post set off a frenzy of speculation, but nothing could have prepared fans, or the industry, for what followed. 1 week later, with no prior announcement or press release, a surprise hour-long documentary premiered exclusively on a small independent streaming platform, True Real, titled, Unscripted, Kelly and Tim. No flashy edits, no staged performances, just raw, handheld footage of two artists sitting across from each other in a quiet Nashville studio. The film opened with 10 full minutes of silence, broken only by the sound of distant traffic and shifting chairs. It was uncomfortable, vulnerable, and absolutely captivating. For the first time, Kelly and Tim laid bare the full scope of their fractured history, how a failed co-headlining tour in 2014 unraveled their trust, how industry pressures pit them against each other, and how ego, pride, and public expectations had created personas neither of them could recognize anymore. Tears were shed, real ones. There were awkward pauses, disagreements, and even laughter between old friends trying to reconnect without an audience to please. Critics were blindsided. What many had dismissed as a calculated feud now appeared as something far more tragic. Two people crushed by fame's machinery, trying to reclaim their voices. Within hours, Unscripted went viral, not because of scandal, but because of its brutal honesty. And for the first time in months, headlines began to shift. Redemption, not ratings, healing, in harmony. But in true dramatic fashion, the final frame of the documentary hinted that this wasn't